Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Women of the Quran, a new series by Muslimah Media channel. So our story today is about Maryam, or Mary, the Virgin Mary, peace be upon her. She is known as Mary, the mother of Jesus, although in the Quranic account she is often referred to as the daughter of Imran. Now Maryam hails from a very noble lineage, and what I think is so significant about the story of Maryam, not only is she involved obviously in the birthing of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, in the process of virgin birth, but her own backstory is so fascinating. Maryam herself at a very young age was consecrated for the worship of the Lord in the temple during her time. And that in and of itself was so unique. So you have to picture this society, right? Wherein typically during the time of Maryam, and of course we would have interpreted that particular community as belonging to the Jewish community, right? Although in the Quranic sort of vocabulary, they're all Muslims in the sense they submit to God. But this is pre-Islam in the sense that this predates Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So imagine this: you have sort of this Jewish community where there are very kind of like orthodox patterns of worship and habits, where women sort of are retiring, they're in the house, they don't really have a public role. Where if a family wishes to sort of be sort of elevated in the eyes of the community and they want to consecrate a child of theirs to worship, to service, it's always a boy. That is the role that boys take on. Boys are the ones who are sent to the temple to devote themselves to worship, right? To the reading of previous scriptures. This is clearly a male role. Now, what happened with Maryam is that and Surah Ali Imran actually recounts how when Maryam's mother, who is known, she's not mentioned in the Quran, but she's called the wife of Imran, but some of the sources pre-Islam refer to her name as being Hannah, that when she conceives Mary or Maryam, she makes a dua. She basically makes an oath, right, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She pledges that this child of hers will be consecrated to the service of the divine. Then, lo and behold, in this very conservative society, wherein gender roles are very kind of like highly circumscribed, she has this girl, and she says, wait a minute, what am I going to do with this girl? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says to her that He knows what He creates, and the male is not like the female. So the mother of Mary proceeds with her plan and places Mary herself in the temple, right? This is quite unusual in this day and age for a girl to be consecrated to the service, to the worship of the divine. So she's in the temple, and miracles happen to this remarkable young woman. She's known to be chaste, devout. Men are not coming back and forth. The only man that is allowed to actually go into the temple is the prophet Zechariah, who was like the prophet at the time. And Zechariah is said to actually be her uncle, and he's the father of the prophet Yahya, her cousin. So Zechariah comes into the temple, and one time he says, Mary, what is this food that you've been given? Because he sees she has all this beautiful, this splendid repast on the table in front of her. And Mary says, this is just one of the miracles. It just happens, right? So she witnesses these miracles while she's at worship in the temple. And then, as we know, another thing that happens to her is that, again, this is a situation where the only man who ever comes in is her uncle, but one day a man that she doesn't recognize appears before her. And it's the archangel Gabriel, right? She doesn't realize this at first, and she says to him, basically, fear God, right? And he tells her that she is going to have a son, and of course she essentially recoils in astonishment, because you have, again, this young woman who has been dedicated to the service of her Lord. She's not She's not married. She's in the temple. She's worshiping. This is her life, right? So she hears from the angel that she's going to become pregnant with a child. And of course, she's astonished. She says that no man has touched her. How is this possible? And then that's when Jibril alayhi salam, tells her that it's her destiny to bear Isa alayhi salam, right? The Messiah, al-Masih. And that's what happens in the Quran. And one of the things I've discovered is Mary's story is told in previous scriptures, certainly, but it's not told the way it's told in the Quran. The Quranic account of Mary is very, very sensitive in the sense that it actually tells us how she responds to this very news and how she handles her pregnancy and what it does to her. So in the Quran, we learn that she, towards the end of her pregnancy, as she's about to go into labor, she's in a very, very difficult situation because she knows she can't go to her family as a young girl would typically do, right? She's not married, so where does she go? So she's actually inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to kind of go to the outskirts of town, and she finds kind of like an oasis of date palms. She clings to the palm trees, and the Quran in a very sensitive way talks about how the pain of childbirth overcomes her. And this is not mentioned in other scriptures. It's mentioned only in the Quran. The pain of childbirth overcomes her, and she cries out to her Lord that I wish I had just been a thing forgotten. That I wish that she's despairing at this point, right? That what's happening to her? What is the divine wisdom in all of this? But Allah Ta'ala, God reassures her, and He says, eat from the date palm, drink this water, and there's like a spring of water that's flowing at her feet. And so she eats the date, she drinks the water, she becomes calm. She gives birth alone to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, and then she takes a deep breath, and she says, now she takes her baby, she wraps him up, she holds him in her arms, and now she, the Virgin Mary, the one who was consecrated by her family to worship in the temple, the one who had no relations with any man, now has to go to her people with a baby in her arms. Imagine that. Subhanallah. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ spoke so highly of this woman, that he mentions her as being a woman that's promised paradise. It's because of what she had to go through as a young woman, and how she never lost faith in the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for her. Now what happens is she goes to her people, but miraculously the baby, Jesus himself, speaks from the cradle, right? Again, here's something else that's not necessarily mentioned in previous scriptures, that Isa alayhi salam himself vindicates his mother's reputation by being given the miraculous ability to speak from infancy. Maryam is actually told by God not to speak. Like, she receives a form of wahi, or inspiration. And remember, all this time, Maryam alayhi salam, peace be upon her, is receiving a form of wahi, or inspiration from God. And the wahi tells her to basically undertake a vow of silence, right? And that's what she tells her people, that she is fasting. And literally the definition of fasting at that time was an oath of silence in which she can't speak, but her baby speaks and vindicates her reputation. And that is the story of Maryam, Mary, peace be upon her, a woman who is mentioned by name in the Quran, and actually an entire chapter, the 19th chapter of the Quran, is named for the Virgin Mary. Maryam al-Adhra bint Imran, she's the daughter of Imran, and she's the mother of Isa al-Masih, right? And who is also known as being from the Spirit of God. That's Maryam, and let's make dua that we can have just a fraction of the faith and dedication that Maryam had. May God be pleased with her, and may God's peace be upon her and her son. And make sure you tune in, inshallah, for our next episode in our series, Women of the Quran, another amazing story to share. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Zainab, and I want to thank you for watching Women of the Quran, a series of Muslimah Media channel. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, tell all your friends and family, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Inshallah, see you next time.